Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we got a new microphone here. The old one's decided to crap out, so hopefully the sound quality is a little bit better. However, we have our old intake here. I don't know really what to call it. It's a manifold, it's an intake, whatever you want to call it. Obviously you have your throttle intake here, be like your throttle body, where a throttle body would be on a gas engine. But we don't have one of those on this. But anyway, so we have our old intake here, and it was sitting on the engine. I just took it off just to get it off the engine. It was just sitting there, wasn't bolted down. And we have our new one here. Now we splurged and bought an O-Dawg's S2R intake for the 6-liter here. So we need to transfer all of this stuff onto this manifold, and they do provide you with everything that you would need to install this, minus gaskets and O-rings. I wish they would supply those items with this intake. It would make this install much easier, because you have to now source all of your gaskets, and some of them are one-time use only. So for your EGR, that's a one-time use only gasket on all ends of it. They do supply you with the things that would be different or needing to be replaced, such as your brass nipples here. So they do offer those. Now we are not going to reuse the one here for the van. However, the van one has a different one on the inside here. So we will be reusing this fitting here. So need to make sure that we get this fitting out and put it in here. And if it doesn't fit, because we are doing this on a van, I did contact them and they have not told me that they put this on a van. They said that it wasn't, to their knowledge, any of these put on a van yet. If somebody installed one, they just don't know about it. So to my knowledge and theirs, this will be the first one that they've sold that is going on an E-Series. So we are going to try to get this stuff out of this intake manifold here and get it transferred over into this one. Now, in looking at this one here, it looks like there's a metal gasket between the manifold and the upper tube here, but I won't know until I get this off of here. And we just got to start moving stuff over. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this intake here, and then show you what comes with this intake specifically, and then we can start moving stuff over. But there may be problems here. So from information and research, I have found that some people have problems with the pulley up front here. That would be on the front cover. It wants to maybe cause a problem here. So we need to look at that. And then we also need to see how this is going to clearance with fuel lines. So we're probably going to end up making a custom fuel system for this van. So we may run into problems with the fuel lines, because the fuel lines for the van run up and over the manifold here, and so does the wiring. It's a little bit more compact. So I'm going to show you everything that comes with this manifold and start moving stuff around. So we have our brass fittings here. We're going to start with something simple here. So these seem to be the same thread pitch. So that one seems to go there nicely, and this one seems to go here nicely. So we'll have to change those over, not necessarily this one. But here's your bolts. So these bolts actually go down in these holes and bolt down here. So this is the big improvement of this intake. So they get rid of your runners that would be inside the manifold here that these bolts here pass through. So instead of the air having to go around each one, it basically can go right through. Now the problem with doing this is there's a very good risk of dropping the bolt down into this hole when you're trying to install it. And then also it goes into the intake of the head, and then you got to try to fish it out. So what you can do is, if you have a long bit here, you can take a magnet and put your magnet on it. Okay, and then that'll make this magnetic. Now, if you run it on there a little bit, it makes the whole bit magnetic. So you will be able to put this on here, and it might dangle, but it doesn't want to fall off until you actually push it. So you're going to be doing this gently, and even you can see it wiggles, but you can see down in there and put it down into its respective hole. And you can see that it wants to stay down in there now since there's some resistance on this. But it will come back out, see? So magnifying the bit is a very good idea here. So once you put your bolts in and get this fastened, they give you these ports that would thread in here to seal this all up. Now we will be installing all of this hopefully today on this video, but the first thing I want to do is, before I put this even remotely on, I want to try to get everything moved over and in its proper orientation. So we will be starting with the simple stuff here. So we're going to do these hoses, get these hoses moved over to the new intake, and then just work our way across here, get our EGR moved over, and then also get the intake here moved over. So we'll start with taking this little hose clamp off of here, and we'll see if this intake hose wants to come off. There we go. So this is the line that goes to the map sensor. So it's a little bit dry, so we'll probably end up replacing this hose. It's pretty dry and hard, and it's starting to crack on the inside here. It's a little hard to see, but you can see a couple little cracks starting there. So we'll probably be replacing this hose. Now we need to get this hose off of here. All right, so now give this a little bit of a twist here. Get it broke free. And then remove. So you can see that this is a much different fitting than what they give you there. And we're gonna go ahead and replace this fitting, move it over to the other one there, and we'll probably leave this guy in here and just use one of their fittings that we're given with. So this guy, we need to get out of here. So we'll have to get a wrench and remove this from the manifold and then reinstall it on this side. So this is a jam nut style. So now that we loosened that jam nut, we should be able to turn this fitting out of here. So you can see that O-ring disintegrated there. So we're gonna have to get a new O-ring for this. And hopefully we can find something that'll fit that, because that baby is toast. So I want to make sure that this actually does fit in here, which it does, so that's great. So we're just going to leave that there for now. And then this would be the smaller of the fittings. So if you had to use fittings here, this would go here. And then the smaller one goes here. So this one would get Teflon, and since this is an O-ring Boss type fitting on this one, this would, will not get Teflon here because it'll seal up as we turn it in. So we're going to put a little bit of Teflon on this guy and put it in here, and we'll worry about that in a little bit here. So want to get this stuff off of here. So we'll work on getting this plenum off. Gotta love these swivel sockets. Because getting a 8mm in there with a 3H drive is gonna be hard. So now we can pick this up off of here. You can see the crud that's on here. So we will be taking this off. So we have an O-ring under here that will be replaced. And there's also a gasket here. So this gasket actually does not come in any of the kits that I have seen. So I'm not real sure how to replace it short of just reusing it. So I need to look into replacing this gasket or replacing this whole piece here. So I'll have to do a little bit of research on that. Obviously, I know why the shield is there because we have the EGR here and it helps direct the airflow away. So I don't know about getting the gasket here. We'll do a little bit of poking around and see if we can figure out where that gasket is. And we're going to clean this up before we put it back on. Oh, moment of truth. Is this going to come out of here? Look at that. So we do have new O-rings for this. You can see that these ones are tore up. So we have no O-ring up on the top here. Looks like we have a gasket that is a pressed composite material. So we'll be changing that gasket and these two O-rings and installing this all back into the new intake here. So we got a little bit of cleaning to do. And at that point, we can start reassembly here. But we need to move this bolt that's over here over, and the two front bolts on the front of the manifold here. Sorry for the wiggly camera. It's sitting on the table with me. So it's moving a little bit there as I move around on the table here. So we're going to move around and get this all cleaned up here and hopefully start to reinstall some stuff and figure out what to do with this little gasket and shield here. So I asked some people about this and I was told they've never seen it before, but he doesn't work on vans. Now he did get a newer van engine in there and I didn't ask him if he had seen one of these yet. However, I don't think we're going to put this back on, especially since when I bought the upper reseal kit, it didn't come with this gasket. So this is just a standard paper gasket. So that's not going to go back on, I don't think. But we still need to get this sensor out of here. So we are going to go ahead and remove this guy out of here. If it'll come out. Might have to get a socket for it, get some leverage. There we go. So you can see that this baby is all cruddy and we have an O-ring here. So I'm going to go ahead and attempt to clean this off because this looks like it should not be this dirty. And this might have been our whole problem the whole time with this van. But we'll get this cleaned up or replace it, one or the other, and get this installed in our new intake over here. So I was talking about this fitting. Now, this fitting will thread down into here. However, this is an NPT thread, and the original intake had a little bit of an O-ring boss in here. So there's no O-ring boss in here, as you can see. So there's no O-ring boss here. Now, that causes a problem because there's an O-ring boss on here, and I have an O-ring for this. But with there not being an O-ring boss and this being tapped as NPT, we're almost forced to use this larger fitting here. So I will have to use this fitting instead of this fitting. And I'm hoping that this doesn't cause me any issues. If it does, we'll have to remove this fitting and then try to find something that is like this with an NPT thread that will tighten up, and then we'd have a 45 off like original. So we'll get that threaded in here. We'll put this little guy over here. And then we have our sensor that is all cleaned up now. So this is much cleaner, but we also need to lubricate this O-ring before we thread it in here. So I'm just going to set it there for now. That is where that goes. Now the reason I'm not doing the lubrication on this O-ring now is because I need to install this thing here. So when you're installing your EGR gaskets and O-rings, you need to put your gasket that's on the base here first. So I've cleaned this all up because it would be ugly if it wasn't on this new intake, and we just slide this gasket over everything carefully to try not to break it, because it's just a little fiber gasket. Okay, so we got it set on there. We have our new O-rings that we match to our old O-rings. We'll just slide these on. Now we did the top one first because it gets the O-ring there first. Whenever you put these O-rings on, just give them a couple spins here to make sure that they get any rotation out of them. And we'll lubricate this and put this in here as well. So we have everything gasketed that needs to be gasketed, and we have our O-rings all on. So we're going to get our lubricant here, lubricate this O-ring, lubricate both of these O-rings, and get them set down in here. So this guy goes here, and then we'll put a little bit of lubrication on these O-rings. You don't want these to be cut. And because we are using a brand new intake here, I'm actually going to try to lubricate down inside here, because this will help facilitate sealing, because when you go to put this in, this first O-ring is going to get all of its lubrication removed on these top bosses here. So make sure that we lubricate down in this hole here, because we want to make sure that we don't cut the O-ring when we put it in. So do the same thing, because there's technically 3 little levels in here. So I'm going a little generous on this lubrication because I don't want this to be cut. And we're going to do this top one here a little bit also. So when I say that there's 3 levels down in here, you can see there's one level, then the level below it, and then the level below that. So the O-ring has to pass through all of those to seal up. So always lubricate down in here to get those lubricated when you're putting them in. So this EGR only goes one way, plug towards the back, and you can see it kind of just slid right down in there. So just push it the rest of the way. Maybe. So just double check we're not messing up an O-ring here. So we're just getting caught on that top ring there. There we go. So we got that installed there. Hopefully the O-rings are okay. And we'll just get our 2 bolts started here. Next, we have our intake elbow here. So I've cleaned this all up and tried to get all the corrosion and crap off of it. We have a new O-ring here. No lubrication on this because it is a non-captured O-ring. It is just a sealing surface. And we did not reinstall that shield. So now we can go ahead and tighten all of this down. Now I know you can't really see the EGR solenoid right now, but we are going to tighten everything down and torque everything to, I believe, 12 or 13 foot-pounds. So I'll look that up here and make sure that that's right, but we're going to get these all snug down. So these are supposed to be 10 foot-pounds. So we're going to make them 120 inch-pounds. So now that we have all these torqued down, we still have to tighten up our sensor over here. This is, I think, 13 foot-pounds is what they call for this guy here. So you can torque this if you want, but good and snug is going to work for that sensor here. And then we need to tighten down our brass fittings here for our hoses. But we'll do these once we get them on and get this intake installed. So that's our next step here, is we're going to get this put on the engine. So now the fun part begins here. We have to get our bolts down in here. Okay, so we don't have any clearance issues, doesn't seem like, so that's good. Close to the thermostat, no issues here. So we shouldn't have any issues getting any of this installed here. So now we have to take the tedious time and put these bolts in here without dropping them down into the intakes. So the best thing you can do here is take a light and look down in here and make sure that your intake gasket is properly lined up with your holes, and make sure that your intake gasket here is also lined up with the plastic here, because there's a little plastic bevel there that will hold the gasket in the right orientation here. So if it's not where it's supposed to be, it can actually leave this sit up high like this and cause you a failure. So I can't see down into this one too well here, but it looks like we're fairly lined up. I'll have to get a light and look down in there. But let me grab a light. I'm going to look down in here and make sure that we're good. So it looks like we're pretty well lined up here. From what I can see, it's a little hard to see here. Now we are going to be reusing 2 bolts, I do believe, here in the back. So what we're going to do is get these 2 started back here, because these will help get us everything aligned properly. So we have our back 2 installed here. And what you can do is, you can take, if you have a stud here from the old intake, take it and get it started. So now this is actually getting this all lined up here. Yeah, so we are lined up here. So we should be able to do this side without an issue. I'm probably gonna do the same thing and put a stud over here, and that'll just make sure that this is all lined up so we're not sitting here trying to fight putting those Allen bolts down in these holes. Okay, so with these two studs in here, these are good for alignment. We can go ahead and start putting these guys in. I showed you the magnetizing earlier of the tool. So we are still magnetized here, and we're just going to take our sweet old time doing this. And I will be checking every one of these bolts when I do this. If you take your light and shine it down in the hole like that, you can actually see in there better. So we've got all of our bolts started here. And now we're gonna have to torque these all down. There is a sequence to it, so we're gonna have to follow that sequence here. So I'm gonna pull that sequence up so we can torque these down properly, and that will be the install of this intake. So the magnetization works very well. As you could see, I checked every one of the bolts before I put them in to make sure they weren't gonna fall off. And the longer Allen key made it much easier. So getting it down in there is a lot easier with the magnetization of the tool. It'd be nice if they used a standard bolt because you can buy sockets that have magnets in them. However, I understand the purpose of the Allen head because of the small constraints to get, you know, the actual bolt down in there. And this is just as easy, so then you can recess the bolt down in a lot smaller hole, and it makes sense. So, you know, get yourself a decent magnet. So this is just a magnet out of an electric motor I tore apart, and you can run it this way, and it makes it magnetic. And then if you run it across it, it's no longer magnetic. So if you don't want it to be magnetic when you're done, you can just run the magnet a different way, and you can see it's sticking there, and then it's not sticking anymore. So you know, a decent sized magnet's better than a smaller magnet. So if you have something like this guy here, this makes it a little bit nicer. So we're going to get these all torqued down and go from there. So we need to loosely install these. So we've got them all kind of in. I'm just going to wind them down by hand here. And I've done all of that when I installed these. I went until they touched, then just backed them off. So what we're going to do now is we are going to go ahead and torque these down. So to torque these, we need our inch-pounds ratchet here. And we have it set to 96. So we start with this guy back here. And then come up to this front corner here. A light would be helpful. There we go. An extension is nice also. So now that we've got that one, we're basically just going to work our way up from this back. So once we get this whole side done, we can transfer over to this side here and start in this front corner. Then we'll bump back to this guy here in this back corner, and then we will work our way back from the front. So once we've done back this side, we have to start all over with our number one, which is this guy here, and go through the torque sequence one more time. So this is their third step here. So we did this side, now we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now we need to do these guys again. So this is why it's important to have this paper here that I have. It makes my life a little easier. So we did 8 here, so we're going to jump over and do 9 on the back here. And then our 10 in the front. And then our 11 through 16 to finish. So you can go through and double check these if you wish. It's a lot of double checking. So I'm gonna actually go ahead and double check these, but I'm just not gonna film it because it just takes a lot of time to hit them all. And then we can go ahead and start doing our plugs. So now we're gonna start installing our plugs here. So these plugs are O-ringed. So basically we're going to lubricate all of these before we install them, because they are a captured style O-ring here. So going to be lots of lubrication and lots of spinning here. So we're going to get all these lubricated and get these all installed. So now these are all installed, we're going to go ahead and just wind them down in, and then we're going to torque them down. So we're going to torque these down to 13 foot-pounds. Now this torque spec was not given to me by anybody. I'm going off the reference here that this sensor should be 13 foot-pounds. So I assumed that these plugs should also be 13 foot-pounds. So that's how I came up with the 13 foot-pound number, because O-Dawg does not supply you with a torque specification for these. Now, if you wish, you can go ahead and go back over those. I probably will here a little bit later, but we still have to tighten up our hose barb fittings here, so I'm going to tighten those up real quick, and then that should be the end of this install, hopefully. So we got our brass fittings installed here. Hopefully we don't have any issues with this not facing out that way, which we probably shouldn't. So this was my assumption for these lines, because this line is smaller for the map. So the hose will dictate your size here. So you can see the diameter of these hoses is much different. So the smaller one would be here and the larger one would be here. So that is how I deduced that these hoses are for which area here. And it looks like somebody got a little overzealous with this hose at some point. But like I said, we'll be replacing this map line because it is very hard and brittle. So we'll be replacing this before we install it. And then this is just a coolant hose. So we're going to go ahead and just slide this guy on here for now, because I know that that's where that one goes. So hopefully I did this correctly, which I'm pretty sure I did. So hopefully this will help you guys in installing an O-Dawg intake on your 6-liter. This was, I think, a worthwhile upgrade, especially being in the van with heat issues. So we decided to run the O-Dawg intake on here. Now, if you can find an S3R intake, those bring some big money. So they're kind of hard to come across. So the S2R is going to be the main fit here, but I don't know if we'll run into any issues with this on the front here. If we do, I'll cover those in later videos, but wanted to show you how to get these in here and show you a little bit of install tricks on how to get the Allen bolts down inside here without dropping them. It's kind of difficult to do sometimes, so it's nice to have these little tricks. But we torqued everything down to my knowledge properly, and we shouldn't have any issues with this, and hopefully this will lower some EGTs for us in this van and give us a little bit better airflow, maybe a little better fuel economy and some more horsepower. So I know O-Dawg doesn't supply any gaskets with this, and you can buy a service kit from them though for these O-rings, for these plugs. So if you do end up removing this and want to replace these O-rings, they do sell the O-rings that you can buy separately so you can replace those. So lubrication's a big thing here. You want to make sure you lubricate everything that is captured. You know, if it's going to be sliding into a cavity or anything like that, such as the EGR, these plugs, the O-ring gasket on this intake here is not so important because it's just a squish, so it doesn't need to be lubricated. It won't get cut. So hopefully this will show you guys some tips and tricks on installing a O-Dawg intake on your 6-liter here. Obviously, it's much easier when it's not in its engine compartment. So if you have your engine out, I highly suggest doing this while it's out and not trying to do it in the truck. If you do try to do it in the truck, make sure you use the magnet trick because it's definitely a time saver and a life saver. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Really enjoy making them for you. So hopefully we can get this thing all put back together and in the van soon. So we're getting close, finally going the right way here. So appreciate you guys watching the channel. Hope you're enjoying my videos, and hopefully we'll see you a little bit more here in the future. So thanks for watching, guys. Catch you on the next one.